Are heretics? Is it possible to disfellowship Jehovah? Is it possible to disfellowship Jehovah God from the Jehovah Witness organization? Because we're having family worship and we came to the chapter about Jezebel. So the story is that I have a hobby of collecting ridiculous way of being disfellowshipped. And someone gave me an example in the comment section that owning a pet snake. Are you leaving? Are you leaving Jehovah? So, if you don't know about this, but you could actually be disfellowshipped for owning. How the heretics? Is it possible to disfellowship Jehovah God from the Jehovah Witness? And the answer is yes. So we're having family worship here, and I have this hobby of trying to find ridiculous ways to be disfellowshipped from the Jehovah Witnesses, because everyone knows about the big terrible thing you can do to be disfellowshipped from Jehovah Witness, like having a blood transfusion, killing someone, or having a Christmas tree. Then you will be disfellowshipped. But there are, believe it or not, ridiculous way of being disfellowshipped, and that's my hobby. I collect them. So you can leave in the comment anything that I can be disfellowshipped that would be objectively ridiculous. So someone left me a comment that it's possible to be disfellowshipped for having a pet snake. And that depends a little of elder roulette. If you're lucky with the elders, you will not be disfellowshipped. But if they do their homework, which they should, they will find this paragraph. It says, it's not proper for a Christian to administer a blood transfusion to an animal owned by him or to authorize another to do so. So you cannot give a blood transfusion to an animal if you're a Jehovah Witness. And then it says, out of respect for God's directions, individuals should be encouraged to avoid deliberately putting to direct use blood or blood products such as fertilizer or animal food made from blood. And now when I think about this, Jehovah could be disfellowshipped according to this wonderful chapter with Jezebel. So someone left a comment that you can be disfellowshipped for owning a pet snake, because if you feed a pet snake, you have to feed him a live mouse, and a live mouse will not have been drained for blood. So that could actually be a disfellowshipping, a little bit depending on what congregation and what elders you have. But then what about this lovely woman? So she's portrayed as a terrible person in the Bible, and the Watchtower art department made her extra terrible because she has a lot of makeup, because she's a terrible worldly woman. She has a lot of gold because she's a terrible worldly woman, and she had red hair because she's a whore. If you watch Watchtower literature, when the art department picture a whore and they make a drawing and publish in the literature, she's always red hair. And how do I know this? This is a true story that actually makes Watchtower sound good, and I think it's fair to have it. A friend of mine, she's a red-haired woman, and she had noticed that every picture of Babylon the Great or anything like this would be a red-haired woman. Always. Every time. So she was in Brooklyn, and they were in the art department, and she asked the question. Women are not supposed to ask questions, and especially not critical questions. But she didn't meant it critical. It was more like a joke. So she asked the guy in charge of some kind of higher up in the art department, why do you always depict the whore of Babylon or any whore in the Bible as having red hair? And the brother in charge, he just lost everything. He didn't know what to say, and he took it very, very serious, much more than she had meant. Because I think she underestimated the fact, Americans, we love them, but they are really offended about everything. And up until this moment, this poor brother never realized that things can be offensive to red-haired people too, Americans, they are known about Latinos, African Americans, Caucasians, and Native Americans. Red-haired people, can also be offended. And this was kind of the first time he noticed that. So the next time there was a picture of Babylon the Great, she had black hair. So this sister that used to be a friend of mine, she would tell this as a story, and I trust her. So maybe that's what happened. Anyway, in my childhood book, my book of horror stories, she had red hair. But the Bible also say that she was thrown out of the window and a dog ate her. So, did she contain blood or not? If you're a Jehovah Witness apologist, you will say, well, after the gruesome murder, maybe some of the blood went out. Well, I can tell you, as a dog owner and living on a farm, if there's blood, the dog will lick the blood before they go to the meat. But we have her husband. Her husband was called Ahab. There was a prophecy from God. They say, this is what Jehovah say, in the place where the dogs licked up the blood of Naboth, the dogs will lick up your blood. So her husband, when he was killed, the dog licked up his blood. So if God gave blood to the dogs, that would be a disfellowshipping offense, just as if I owned a pet snake. But it gets better, because Ahab repented, and God said, since you repented, all these bad things will not happen to you. And then, in Kings 22:23, God changed his mind and sent false prophets for him to be killed. And it says in 2 Kings 22:23, no, 1 Kings, when they washed off the chariot by the pool of Samaria, the dog licked up his blood and the prostitutes bathed there, according to the word that Jehovah had spoken. So he was first convicted to death. Then Jehovah says that everything was okay. And then Jehovah used prophets to lie. That would also be a disfellowshipping offense. And then they gave the blood to the dog. The dogs licked up the blood, and the prostitutes bathed there. How did Jehovah know the prostitutes bathed there? Was he looking? That would be the fourth disfellowshipping. But then when we come back to our friends in the governing body, they're not inspired, but they're wonderful people and they're right about everything. And it says, out of respect for God's directions, individuals should be encouraged to avoid deliberately putting to use direct blood or blood products such as fertilizers. You should not even use it as fertilizer. But what about the red-haired prostitute? Well, it says here in 2 Kings 9:35, but when they went to bury her, they did not find anything but her skull and her feet and the palms of her hands. Maybe some of the rings were missing. When they returned and told him, he said, this fulfills the word of Jehovah that he spoke through his servant Elijah the Tishbite, saying, in the plot of land of Jezreel, the dogs will eat the flesh of Jezebel, and the dead body of Jezebel will become as manure on the surface of the field of the plot of land Jezreel's. So Jehovah predicted the dogs would lick up the blood, and it should be used as manure. So that's the problem with Jehovah. If he would spend more time reading Watchtower literature, he would have known that out of respect for God's direction, we should not use blood or blood products to feed animals, and we should also not use it as fertilizer. She was used as fertilizer by Jehovah. So there's 4 reasons why Jehovah should be disfellowshipped. The funny thing with this woman, you remember what a terrible thing she did? She killed Naboth. How did she kill Naboth? You're making noise in the video. How did she kill Naboth? She used the 2-witness rule. Kind of show how stupid a 2-witness rule is. Because people can lie, there can be a lack of witness, there can be lying witnesses. That's why you need DNA. That's why you need is to establish a timeline, all of those things that professionals can do. Anyway, so that's why Jehovah Witnesses, according to this chapter, it's 4 reasons why Jehovah should be disfellowshipped. So if anyone sees him, we have to take a serious talk. So you probably heard that there's been a lot of progress in Norway, and so we're planning protests now in Denmark, in Hillerød, and in Malmö. Imagine if we can do the same thing in Denmark as we did in Norway, because basically what have changed in Norway now is that the definition of a religion includes that they should respect human rights. When the Catholics respect the Lutherans, and the Lutherans respect the Muslims, and the Muslims respect Jehovah Witnesses, and the Jehovah Witnesses respect the Baal worshippers, and the Baal worshippers respect me, then we have a beautiful society. And that's the way it's supposed to be. So if you want to come to the protest in Denmark, in Hillerød, or in Malmö, let me know. And please share this video. So thanks to my patrons, and see you in paradise.